Hello and welcome to Simon's Trading Channel. My name's Simon. This is my daily Bitcoin price action analysis. Happy Friday to you. That's right, it's the coming up to the end of the week. In fact, on CME, the end of the week is in 2 hours and 15 minutes. And it'll be another week within the range of doom. So that makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Which means my prophecy is getting closer and closer to coming true. And if it does, that is no testimony to me as a person. It's just a fluke. But nonetheless, I did say about 4 weeks ago that this could end up being an 8-week range, and it's 3/4 there pretty much. So yeah, before I dive into more detail, I just want to remind you this is not financial advice. Okay, back to Bybit, which is over here, and this is where I've got my range of doom on, as you can see. Now, what I would say is just looking at those weekly candles, unless anything drastic particularly happens between, so Bybit doesn't technically close, but it has its weekly closure in 2 days and 6 hours, so at midnight on Sunday. If the candle continues to look like this, you can see that each of these in fact, well, that's an indecision week, but each of these red candles on a weekly have not been bearish engulfings. They've been obviously the week's worth of price action has in some cases been over $15,000, particularly last week. But the end of the week effectively had a predominance for buying rather than selling. So that's just an observation, and that probably didn't make any sense. If it doesn't, I apologise. I'm being distracted by my beautiful collie Millie, whose eyes are like a wonderful poison. I don't know what that means. Sorry about that. Anyway, so this is the 4-hour chart, and there you go. There's the range. So yesterday I was alluding to a potential move up, which seems to have happened. There's certainly been a decent bounce. Now, to look at it in more detail, I'll drop down to the 15-minute time frame, but effectively came down pretty much to the bottom of the range, not quite, which makes me think there is still a bit of unfinished business at the bottom of this range. But momentum, as I said yesterday, is sort of slowly decreasing on to the downside on the lower time frames. Obviously, higher time frames, it's always been, well, it's been up for well over a year, but the lower time frames, it's slowly coming back to the upside, and you can see this trend line has been broken. There have been several 4-hour closures to render that trend line useless, and that trend line, was indeed marking off all the lower highs. So it looks like this last bit of move up is going to turn into a higher high. But to see that better, we'll switch down, or I will switch down to the 50-minute time frame. Everything else in the range remains the same. The bottom's the same, the top's the same, the midpoint's the same, and it has been for 4 or 5 weeks. Which is, when you do a video about Bitcoin every day, that range becomes very familiar. But trying to produce something slightly interesting each day, I don't find challenging, but if the price would just get out of the range, it would give me a lot more ammunition. Anyway, here we go. So this is the 50-minute time frame. So you can see high, probably high up here, lower high, lower high, lower high, lower high, just about lower high. I think this is the first in well, it's the first higher high, but if referencing this as the first high of this move, then indeed it is a higher high. And it looks like we've got a low. We haven't necessarily got a lower low yet, but you can see that it is starting to trend up. And clearly, if this trend continues, then from the bottom of the range, you would expect it to if the range is to continue to exist, then price can't or Bitcoin can't spend all its time in the bottom, because if Bitcoin did spend all of its time bouncing up against what is a support line, i.e. the bottom of the range, so if it did this, I've talked about this a few times, but I'll just recap. So if Bitcoin did this, as in a consolidation but with increasing selling pressure up against support, that's more likely to break down. Whereas following a bounce, because by definition then the range is still intact, you would expect more upside. I hope that made sense. I'm basically stating the obvious, but it's just how I think about these things, or how I try and think about these things in as logical a manner as possible. Because you can sometimes get a bit lost in the price action, but if you just think about them logically, and for me that's two simple things. It's trend, so highs and lows, and whichever distribution they have, and then support resistance areas, which are effectively there to give you targets, or give me targets at least. So yeah, looks like move up, move back down, move up, move back down. And I think there may be another move before any further downside, although I won't be surprised if it does pull back a bit further, maybe to 62.5-ish. I did mention that, I think, 2 days ago, but we'll see. But if indeed there's more upside from here, I'd expect it to go a little bit sideways around the midpoint. Now, it might not just be directly on the midpoint, because remember the midpoint is just a line I've drawn on, it's a line of randomness. But like here, you know, the price gets attracted to it. It doesn't mean it's going to just, you know, exactly bounce off it, but I think it may spend some time going sideways around 66.5, something like that. But then several 4-hour closures above there. So if Bitcoin does this sort of jazz, you know, a bit of sideways, doesn't break down. Wow, that looks like a signature. And then I would expect a move probably back up to somewhere towards 70,000. So I'm sure it won't look anything like that, but several 4-hour closures above this midpoint, and then you'd expect another move up, probably say $3,000. And that would take you back sort of or take Bitcoin somewhere close to 70,000. Probably like 69.5 to 70,000. How am I doing for time? Coming up for 8 minutes. That's okay. Let me just get rid of those drawings because they are ridiculous. And one other thing to say, really, coming into a weekend. So, what I've just described is quite sort of conservative, just, you know, within the range. It's what I expect, but my expectations are just that, and they're certainly not the truth or law, because obviously it's in the future. But is Bitcoin I guess the counter to that is this the time for Bitcoin just to bust on out through the top or through the bottom of the range? And I would suggest coming into a weekend, maybe not. So maybe just a bit more sort of up, maybe up and sideways over the weekend. If it gets back above 70,000, fantastic. But to be honest, I think it's more likely to slowly move back up above the midpoint and then come back to it Monday. But there you go. I'm going to come a draw to this. I'm not going to take up any more of your Friday evening, which is, of course, the start of the weekend. And do me a favour, if you've enjoyed the video, if you find it in any way useful, I don't think it's been particularly amusing this evening, so hopefully it's been useful, then like and subscribe. And if none of that applies, then for goodness sake, don't come back tomorrow, because I'll be doing it all again for Saturday. All right, take care. Enjoy your Friday. Bye-bye.